Something that was said in class that like really stayed with me in terms of what design can do. Design is like the translation. It's the translator between multiple professions. So we sit and we understand stakeholders and we translate them for each and every one. So that we like collectively understand the requirements and needs of each other. And I think that's what unites designers and the other stakeholders that are involved. Um,
Yes, so I mean, that is again what we did in design methods designing. When we went out, we talked to a lot of stakeholders and we kind of brought back.
Yeah.
Again, another question that I had is, so we did talk about these. You talked about these transdisciplinarity and how this is giving that to us, and how we were trying to bring that change overall. But the fact of the matter is, when we graduate, a lot of the designers we are working with will not have this kind of transdisciplinary mindset that we do. They might have just, studied graphic design for 4 years. And, a lot of them aren't even design graduates. A lot of them are doing online courses. A lot of them are engineers who found UX on the side. And, a lot of UX designers are just computer scientists, right? So how can we, I guess, work with them? And maybe they don't have that same mindset as us, but how can we give them that mindset, or maybe help them work in this better manner, right, that we're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, maybe I can start with, and then Lakshmi can either contest it because it's just coming abruptly. So, I think what you can do to facilitate that kind of a conversation or working environment where you feel that you may feel that yes, you're equipped to do that because you trained here rigorously and deliberately to from that perspective, but that doesn't mean that somebody who's taken up design as a career or as a profession may not be capable. I think the capability is always underlying, and therefore there is this system of interviewing, portfolio viewing, etc. When you're giving your entrance examinations. So I feel like that skill is there. It just requires the environment. So maybe as designers or as colleagues or as team members, if you can create that environment within your team to be able to do that, I think it's going to be an excellent way. I mean, think of it as a design project for yourself.
So how can that environment be created though?
Uh,
Any like specific things that can be done?
Yeah, so I think firstly would be something to understand that you're not competing with the colleague, especially as a designer. Every designer is there for a particular intent, and it may need not necessarily be always their own professional and personal growth. It could be, let's say, how can you as a team completely grow together? Because what we've learned so far is that design cannot, or a designer cannot function as a solo designer. There's no such thing as a solo designer. So the moment you're able to establish that confidence in them, that okay, you're not a threat to their career progression. In fact, you're somebody through whom the career can progress. Yeah, I think 90% of your job is done there.
That's a really interesting way to put it, and I agree. And I also want to add a little bit about working with non-designers as well. My first ever job was as an architect in an oil and gas field, and I wondered how I would fit in this in that industry. But interestingly, my role was all about coordinating between people from different disciplines. So, be it HVAC, electrical, telecom, pipeline engineers, and looking at how their facilities and services would fit together in the building and what provisions they would need for it. But it taught me a very important thing is that fundamentally most design is intended to be multidisciplinary or transdisciplinary. But I think we don't necessarily see it that way. And what really helped me and what can help all of us in situations like that, where we are trying to bring in a transdisciplinary approach, is to actually respect and value the expertise of the person that we are collaborating with or we would like to collaborate with. And the minute they feel like their expertise is being put to use in something productive and they're given credit for their input and they're valued for their ideas, then there is a lot more ease of collaboration because they don't feel like someone's stealing my ideas or taking away my thoughts. They feel respected and valued and are very much a part of the process, and also bringing a certain element of ownership, be it through co-design. So by co-design, I mean collaborative design, where we design with them, maybe where we do the technicals of the design, but we allow them to become a participant in the process, or invite them to become a participant in the process. I think such things usually go through much smoothly, and that way we also become some kind of negotiator or a force that brings people together. So this can be true for all designers also, people who are technically trained in different types of design. We can bring in value to their work, and we can like kind of value what they have to give us. And I think there needs to be that symbiotic connection. And then, so it's also a life skill in some way that we need to develop.
I think in school we've just been taught to look at each other's marks, like how much did you get in this exam, and we came with that mindset. But as designers, I think this is like one of the first things that I've had to unlearn, and I'm very happy to, because this competitive spirit, it doesn't really take you too far. It's not motivating for too long. And the more I work with my peers, so many group projects. I mean, like you've seen us all working, struggling to understand each other. But the more I understand others, I feel like the better designer I become. And the more I tend to understand the importance of designing for others. When you were talking about working with other people and transdisciplinarity, what do you think are the boundaries of collaboration? Where does design spill out and go into other disciplines, and where do we have to maintain our stance?
So one thing, just touching on what I said earlier about like the borders and stuff, like borders inherently is kind of like policy, like design in a way, right? So where does policy making end? Where does design begin? And you can stretch this towards all disciplines, right? If we're talking about design being transdisciplinary. So yeah, like how do we know what design is, what it is? Because design can't be everything.
Yeah.
Like we're saying transdisciplinary, but there is still
Yeah.
a boundary. So
Yes.
So do you want to hazard a guess and then we respond to it?
yeah. Sure. Okay. I think it's still a question that I obviously am still going through, but I think specifically when we going back to borders, I think design is something that can facilitate policies. So a simple example would be street signs, right? So when we make street signs, like you are designing them, but the design of those also influences people's behavior, which is policy, right? But I think policy goes a step in terms of like it's the law, right? Policy is written down, it is set in stone, and design is a bit more fluid than that. I think maybe my perception is wrong, but that's I think my thought on it. Vari, what are your?
I think that, like, especially for policy, it's a particular study, right? So those people would be subject matter experts. But to simplify it, I think designers are people experts. So we try to understand people, and we have this conversation that, hey man, it's not just in a book.
Yeah.
It's going to affect people out there, and these are the consequences of your actions. And I think for me, that is what a designer would be doing in policy. And it's not that we're working alone, right? It's not that the policymaker should be working in his own office and I should be working in a separate one. I should sit down, we should have discussions, and we should go out there and ask people, what is the impact? I think for me, that is what I would say. What I think.
Can I build on the same?
Yeah.
So I personally feel, at least for your generation of designers, and I feel like there's an urgency for it. So the reason why we also bring in certain topics when we teach and we force those and you people to think from that perspective is because I feel personally there's right now both urgency as well as the right opportunity for at least you people being in India is where you right now have the opportunity to actually get into or at the table where policymakers sit. You have the opportunity to be in the boardroom when decisions are being made before the brief or the project comes to your table. That's what Nithiesh mentioned, right? Because sometimes all of us are working on what has already been created and built, and therefore a lot of traditional ways and means of looking at designers' job is to just create mediums and tools for it to be implemented. Whereas traditionally also design as a profession or as a skill set is not to just implement that or package it in a more usable product or service manner, but it is to co-create it. And I think there is this openness, and that's the reason why we want to build this capacity within you and that confidence in you that yes, you can walk up, knock, and get inside the boardroom or have this conversation and be at the table. Because if we don't make you capable enough to be at the table, then we're afraid that designers will be a part of the menu in the document in that table. And we don't want you guys to be a part of the menu, but at the table sitting with them.
And I think a really excellent question
Yeah.
to ask is, so when we speak about transdisciplinarity or interdisciplinary collaboration, where I think I would like to do a callback to my previous answer also, is to say that we are not the domain expert in every domain. We are domain experts in certain types of design. It could be tangible, intangible design. So we have a certain skill set to maybe build a service or a product. But when we say transdisciplinarity or interdisciplinary collaboration, we are saying let's not do this in a standalone manner, but let's actually bring in. So if we are building a car, for example, bring in the perspective from the ergonomist, bring in the perspective from the engineer who's designing the motor, bring in the perspective from the person who's designing the tires, and then bring in the scientific perspective, the engineering perspective, and then work on, and then
maybe somebody who's not at all connected right now or is remotely associated to the domain of automobiles or mobility. Right?
Yeah. So how can we bring in these multiple perspectives and then do the design of a car? So that's what we mean. So it does not mean that we are experts or we can claim to be experts in different disciplines, but in the interest of a harmonious collaborations, it's good to get a background on the expertise that somebody has, as in what is the value that they bring in and how can you better use their expertise or bring in their expertise. So that is the kind of knowledge that we will need to develop. And if you're a transdisciplinary designer in a certain field, let's say ecology, related to ecology or related to automobiles, you may not necessarily be a transdisciplinary designer in all other domains as well. Because there is also a limitation to what we can do at a particular kind of time. It's always great to upskill ourselves, but also it's I think that's a very great question and a conversation is to understand what is the degree to which we can exercise our freedom, and what is the point at which we need to respect the other person's expertise and take a step back. And I think that's something for us to be cognizant of when we get into these projects.
And also because of the way in which our mind works or we're trained is to also sometimes look beyond the future or the near future. But a lot of times we need to also make peace with ourselves as designers that, okay, this idea is good, what we know is good, what we're envisioning is good, but maybe it's too early for now. So do we park it aside or do we right now do something so that it gets at least seeded in the system? And therefore, when the time is right, it will be leveraged upon. So I think that's where you need to develop that muscle as well, to respect that okay, maybe right now is not the right time. Maybe, yes, I can see it. I know that if you do this right now, this is what it's going to lead to, because that's how you train to visualize it. But then you have to understand that not everybody has the capacity to take that from you. And therefore, you might, whatever you suggest or your ideas might be neglected or scrapped at that moment. But that doesn't make you somebody who's not capable enough. And that's where I think Mike says in his book, stay where you are to be able to make the difference. So I think that's where all of us need to develop as a capacity that, okay, we should not hate the corporates. We should not hate the kind of opportunity that we've gone into. What can you do while being in the system so that it can be leveraged later? Maybe by, let's say, the next cohort that graduates after you. So are you making room for that? Because that's where your responsibility is, to make room for it and not make redundant mistakes like maybe us when we were designers did.
Yeah. So now that I think Khushboo's brought it in, I have a question for the two of you. Because she said Mike, and just for people listening in, so Mike Monteiro is the author of this book called Ruined by Design. which was introduced in your class as a slightly controversial reading. But we thought you were mature enough to handle it, all of you, even though you were first year students. The title itself hints at something which is ruined by design. So, do you want to tell us a little bit of what you took away from that reading, perhaps?
So the book was definitely a little bit of a shock when we first read it. That's something that we were reading in class, but once we got past that shock, it was definitely like insightful, and it really. So I think until that point, like Khushboo touched on a bit, I was kind of in the mindset, oh, corporates are evil, like capitalism is evil. And like as designers, I should stay away from that as far as possible. Like I need to give up money, I need to like I have to make an NGO, like I need yeah, like I need to, I can't do any of this. But then after reading this book, I realized that while still being part of these maybe problematic systems, there is still things that as designers we can do, we can still make those changes within the system and I can still earn money, right?
Yes, of course.
So
Otherwise, how are you going to prove that design as a profession is lucrative?
exactly,
Yeah.
so I think I like NGOs aren't for everybody, and I don't think everybody should be going into NGOs. And even if you're not doing that, I learned that even if I'm going into a corporate, there's a lot of value I can bring. There's a lot of positive change I can bring to the world. Or what were your thoughts?
I think the book was honest and it was everything that I've been wanting to ask you guys for the longest time. But I think there's always been this fear, and I was so glad that it was introduced in class because I want to earn money. Let's be honest. And how do we do that? How do we make change? Is something that I was also struggling with. Would I be a bad designer if I don't work in an NGO, like Nithiesh said? And like I really want to see the difference made. I really want these corporates to understand the people that they're designing for. And I want design to be seen as more than just the graphic design. Like I'm sick of it at this point. So yes, I think design research and all of these things that were talked about in the book and the principles of designers and being a designer and of design is something that really stayed with me as I read the book. So I think, yeah.
So good to hear that it's had such a positive impact.
Because all we could see at that moment was anxiety, worry, and a lot of them kept coming to us asking, okay, then what do we do? Should we not look for jobs in these places?
I in fact had a half an hour long conversation with me
Yes.
before you broke the last.
I remember that day.
But I'm glad it had such a positive impact. On that note, I just want to ask you, you're close to having finished a year in design education, and perhaps you also thought about it, been curious about it after high school, about design as such. So is there any idea or a book or perhaps like a resource or a video that's stayed with you, that's through this 1 year, and that's kind of been a moment of epiphany or an aha moment for you? So anything you'd like to share?
So one idea that really stuck with me in design methods was the idea that innovation can be replicated. It can be done time and time again. It's a formula. It's not just this light bulb that appears sometimes in your head, which is my perception of it before, right? Like, especially when preparing for design entrances and stuff, like I was taught that creativity is just something that it appears, and sometimes you have it, sometimes you don't. But I think learning how to, I guess, more consistently replicate those aha light bulb moments, I think that was a huge game changer for me. It made me a much more creative person, give me much better ideas for design methods and beyond in the current modules and such. But yeah.
For me, there was this podcast that was recommended by you, I think. And I was listening to how there was just a question asked, why are there open door fridges in grocery stores? And during those 28 minutes, they just talked about how they're basically useless and how much energy that they consume and what's the point of it? Is there intentional design behind all of that? So it was intentionally designed for homemakers back in the 50s. But then after a point, it just lost value because men buy groceries too. And then we just, like, I kept
hearing them talk about how it's basically pointless, it consumes a lot of energy, it's bad for the economy in terms of for the store, and it doesn't really benefit anyone. So it's also something that stuck with me was that we are just used to certain things being a certain way, and then we just don't question it. We need to like begin questioning things that are around us, whether it's a normal door, whether it's a fridge that's oddly not good for anyone. I think we need to start questioning everything that's around us and begin designing for that. And the kind of change and impact that that alone would have would be, I think, amazing. So yeah.
I think two excellent points made. I think the first is that creativity is not this crazy stroke of genius that only occurs when God wants to give it to you, or really live inside you.
The loom.
Yeah, but it's amazing that design or methodologies in design actually teach you how to think creatively or think in different ways. So I think that was excellent. And the other idea that came up is that we have to question everything around us because we may be replicating old patterns that are not necessary anymore. I think two very very interesting perspectives, which I was honestly not expecting to hear. But it's always wonderful to hear how you think and your unique perspectives on everything, and it's just wonderful to like pick your brains on things.
Building on a little bit of Gauri's point,